Hi there, I'm your host, Kate. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, around friends that were entrepreneurs or had parents that were. Throughout my different ventures, I came to a realization that I enjoy talking to people about their careers and listening to their inspiring stories. One day, I thought to myself, why not record these conversations and make it into a podcast? So here we are, and now these stories are available to you with the hope that you'll also find them inspiring. On this episode, I get to connect with Aaron Hurst, an entrepreneur and author of The Purpose Economy. He founded Imperative, a peer coaching platform, and Taproot Foundation. Listen in as Aaron shares about how he helps individuals find purpose and fulfillment at work.
I see that you have a vast amount of experience as an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur, speaker, and author. So in terms of entrepreneurship, you founded both Taproot Foundation and Imperative. Can you tell me a little bit more about those organizations?
Yeah, no, of course. So I've been working for about a little over 20 years in the field of purpose at work, and both organizations are in that field. Taproot Foundation, I started back in 2001, right after 9/11, and was really a nonprofit focused on having business professionals donate their skills, so their marketing, their tech, their HR, their finance, skills to help nonprofits who didn't have access to those resources, and scaled that up across the country into 7 cities, and then worked with the White House to turn it into a $15 billion marketplace for pro bono service. And then ultimately with BMW took it globally to 30 countries around the world. And through that experience, really saw that what people wanted from work was changing, and that there was a need to rethink the workplace. And also that more broadly, like consumer behavior was changing as well. And that's what basically inspired me to write The Purpose Economy and really sort of frame this new economic era that we're in now. But also led me to start Imperative, the second company you mentioned, which I started with the goal of really figuring out, if Taproot had figured out how to make volunteering deeply fulfilling, how do we make work itself fulfilling? So I've been doing sort of research with universities and major companies to try to figure out how do we actually make work itself fulfilling, and then launching a software platform as a venture-backed startup that enables people to own their fulfillment at work and to make their work meaningful.
And aligned with a lot of what individuals are looking for work nowadays. Do you actually see this more common amongst a certain generation, like millennials, or are you seeing it across the board with maybe Gen Z and boomers as well?
It's definitely universal. I think there's people right now who haven't been in an office before because they basically started work during the pandemic. And it's a very acute need there because there's no basis for social interaction, and meaning is pretty minimal. But in general, it's universal need. We find women tend to want it more than men. So see more of a gender divide. It's not by a large margin, but that seems to be more of a predictor than age.
When you talk about finding purpose at work, how do you define that? Is that one definition for everybody, or would you say that every individual will define it differently?
So what we've done is we've taken I would say the art of purpose and turned it into a science, by basically determining the psychological drivers of people that then cause them to articulate their purpose as one thing or another. So it's basically through the process of doing what we call purpose profiling, we're able to determine the purpose of each person. And with that predictive analytics to know what's going to be motivating, what's going to be inspiring to them. And it's not based on what people think purpose is about, which is often a cause or a profession. Like my purpose is to be a doctor, or my purpose is to address climate change. The actual much more scientific definition has more to do with day to day. What are the types of impacts you want to make that day meaningful? That's actually what drives much more value than sort of that that big definition that, our culture tends to lock into around a cause or a profession.
So it sounds like you're saying a cause is different than your purpose.
Absolutely. A cause is like one as an application. Cause is an application to which you can put to focus your purpose. A purpose statement, a purpose should be agnostic to job or cause. Otherwise, what it does, it creates a fixed mindset where you think that that's the only thing. And it externalizes responsibility instead of internalizing responsibility for your purpose and your fulfillment.
How did you find like this path of work? Did you always start in entrepreneurship, and how did it lead you to go down this path of wanting to encourage individuals to find fulfillment and purpose in their work?
I think it's a family business. My grandfather worked for President Kennedy and was the original architect of the Peace Corps. And I've always found that model to be very compelling in terms of having people sort of have these focused, more embedded volunteerism experiences. And then also he was the head of the Aspen Institute for 25 years, which really brought people of different professions together to help find commonality and solve problems together. So he was always an inspiration just in terms of that work. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 16. It's just sort of the way I'm wired. I see problems and I want to solve them. And I tend to enjoy that process of design. So I'm much more of like I would say creative entrepreneur versus like a financial entrepreneur.
Yeah. How do you define creative entrepreneur?
So I think it's in contrast to financial entrepreneur. Financial entrepreneurs look for financial opportunities in a market, and they're pretty much agnostic to the impact of it. They're agnostic to like how you get there. It's just purely they're seeing financial opportunity. A creative entrepreneur sees a need or sees an idea and is driven by the idea and that potential to help people.
Like your drive to help people. I've seen you in videos and featured on different magazines, as well as just being keynote speakers for big companies such as Google, Microsoft, and PwC. How have you seen your work, I guess, resonate with people? Or like, what's the difference that you see after someone applies the purpose economy into their life?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen with Imperative is that like if I do a keynote or something, I call it hit and run. You get people inspired, but it doesn't necessarily create behavior change, which is why, I don't just do that for a living. With Imperative, what we're doing is we're creating choreographed, guided conversations between pairs of people with shared purpose inside a company. And if they do this over a period of time and they're supporting each other, they're setting goals to actually craft their job to be more meaningful and holding each other accountable to that, you start to see people fundamentally change their mindset and their approach to work. And for them to also at the same time build the relationships we need to be successful, both socially and professionally.
So then with Imperative, you pair, like if I was at work, I would be paired with a coworker or a peer, and we would just keep each other accountable and encourage each other at work, or what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, broadly. So if you worked at a company, you would every quarter get matched with another peer. So someone at the same level in a different part of the business. And you go onto our platform and it's video based. And we're actually serving up the questions to ask each other to really help you have the chance to process what's going on for you at work. Think about what you want to do in terms of moving forward in your work. And then make a commitment at the end of saying, here's one thing I commit to doing. And you're both doing that for each other. And when you get back together about 2 weeks later, you then hold each other accountable for having done that, taken that action.
And then when does it end with that peer and moves on to a different peer?
So people complete anywhere from 1 to 5 conversations with a peer. And then at the end of the quarter, they move on to the next one. So it's a way of building a network within an organization.
So it's putting social interaction in work rather than just having someone just be in front of their screen all day. You're actually getting to communicate with other people at your work that you may not meet.
Yep. That's right. And you're helping each other, you're coaching each other, supporting each other, helping to say, share your challenges, share your wins. It's like it creates a support system for you, which is really important.
And have you seen with with COVID being here for the last almost 2 years, have you seen a big drastic change for organizations
Oh, of
going towards?
course. Yeah, I mean, I think there's much more. I think it's a combination of COVID and now just the competitive market for talent combined has made this a high priority for companies because they need a way for people to build relationships. The research shows relationships have been heavily downgraded in sort of the pandemic and with virtual work. At the same time, we know relationships are one of the leading indicators of whether or not someone stays in a job. When we don't have any friends or don't feel a social connection to our colleagues, it's very easy to be recruited away to another job that pays 5% more. Whereas if you have best friends at work, 5% may not be enough to make you want to make that jump. Less on the sort of just economic status. Again, it depends on their situation, et cetera. But in the jobs that are highly sought after, people are looking for flexibility. They want to do work that matters. And they want work where they actually have relationships and interactions with people that they find fulfilling. They don't want to your point, to sit in front of a screen all day without interaction.
So when you say work that matters, how does that change? Because in the end, their job, if it's as a salesperson, for example, is going to be selling and hitting a quota probably per month.
Yep.
But by interacting with their peers, building relationships, and setting goals, how does that change their mindset to say, hey, my work is now more meaningful and have more purpose?
I think part of meaning is like growing as a person. So being able to work with other peers to help you become more self-aware, to challenge yourself, to learn new skills, that creates that sense of some sense of meaning. I think the second piece is, especially like salespeople are constantly failing. It's like part of the nature of that job. So to have peer support to normalize that and not get stuck in like a downward spiral is really important. And then I think a big part of where this comes into play is around fundamentally how we cognitively process our job. So you can think of a job as a sales job and you're selling stuff, or you can sort of focus in on who are these people I get to build a relationship with. How does my product help them? How can I, bring back feedback from buyers to the company? You can take it much more personally, and when you do, it becomes much more meaningful. And that's just a cognitive process of going from transactional to relational and purposeful sales.
Have you seen it or can you share an example of or an organization that you worked with where you've seen a change in behavior before and after going through the program?
Some examples. I just wrote an article for NASDAQ with the CHRO of Accolade, Rick Provost, just talking about, I think their challenge was, the pandemic, but on top of that, they're acquiring companies. And the people inside those companies, like, how do you get them to actually feel like they're part of Accolade more broadly? And how do you have the existing Accolade employees embrace those new people as their brothers and sisters in the company? And what we were able to do there is actually like match people from the existing company with the new companies, but who have the same purpose, and take them through these guided conversations. So they started to humanize each other and started to remove that fear that often comes when you've acquired a company. And there's sort of this threat that comes from that. So there we saw about almost 90% of people said they built a meaningful, lasting relationship with the person that they matched across. Same thing between, they have enterprise employees, think of them as like headquarters, and then frontline. And that was another major divide culturally for them as an organization. So what they're able to do is match them into this peer coaching system and start to actually build awareness and like human relationships between frontline and enterprise employees. So those are sort of examples of how that's played out.
And then did you, or I don't know, you happen to know, but do you know if the turnover rate after that dropped at all?
We haven't studied it within their actual data system because it's not part of our data model. What we are seeing is that of people who in our system are report initially being unfulfilled at work, within 3 months, 62% of them saw a significant increase. And we know that fulfillment is one of the predictors of turnover. whether or not you are fulfilled or not. So it's not a direct measure of retention, but it's a pretty good proxy for whether or not it's making a difference that's going to lead to likely retention of folks.
Yeah, I would agree too, because when people find more satisfaction at their workplace, then I believe retention would be lower as well.
Yes.
That's really interesting to me. And but then what also interests me is how corporations are looking at it. Because as an employee, I would want more satisfaction at work and find more happiness when I do meaningful work. But how are
Yep.
corporations looking at it? Because in my mind, corporations probably just want people to get their work turned in and end goal, maybe like the sales or closing every month. But are corporations actually taking a look at this now and reconsidering it because of such high turnover rate from the Great Resignation?
I don't think there's one answer to that. I think there's different industries, different locations, but I think generally speaking, what you're seeing is that the labor market's so tight that for the first time in history, employees, especially when you think about knowledge workers, have more power than the corporation because they have the ability to just leave and they know they have another job with probably a pay increase that they could start in a week, right? So you suddenly see the fundamental like a flop in the power dynamic, which now has companies and most CEOs now saying retaining people and hiring people is their top priority because they know that without that, sales aren't happening, marketing's not happening, like their shareholder value is not happening. So it's becoming sort of the primary currency now is ability to attract and retain people. So with that, I think, yes, still focused on sales, still focused on engineering output, but recognizing that attracting and retaining those people is ridiculously difficult, and they've got to bend over backwards to set up their work to be somewhere people want to be. It can no longer be sort of this model of, well, they should just be lucky they have a job, which was the early attitude towards work.
Yeah. So something you're pointing out is workers actually, for once, have that upper hand
They
in
do.
the
I mean, I don't
community.
want to. Yeah, I mean, I don't think a nurse on the front line at a hospital does. I don't know that a lot of people in sort of entry level jobs feel that way, but certainly, as you're looking at, college educated folks, most of them have the upper hand in the labor market right now.
Your whole work is around finding purpose in work, even including your book. What would you say your purpose is now?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's sort of a psychological version of it, which then I sort of translate into sort of the poetic version. So for me, I frame my purpose is to awaken lions so that they can care for their pride. So what that means to me is I really find meaning in helping people be courageous, people finding their voice, helping them fundamentally transform into their potential. And the why behind that is so that they can ultimately, take care of their community, their environment, their family, so that collectively, you see society more successful. So that's how I think about what, drives me in. If I look at every success I've had in my career, it's tied back to that purpose.
Awesome. And was there a singular event that made you want to do this? Like, hey, I want to go out and help people become the best they can.
I don't think there's a singular. I mean, I think there's lots of reinforcing events, and if you have to create a story, you can create one. But I think it's partially how I'm wired. It's pretty interesting how it just distributes in society these percentages of people who have these different purpose profiles. And what I've found is that everything I do, it goes back to just sort of operating that way. So it's much more psychological than choice, if you will. It's not that I intentionally go out and say, how do I do this? It's more I find myself always going back to doing that because that's what motivates me, and it's the way I try to create change in the world.
Your work is seen as being very successful in life already. So you're actually one of the fortunate ones, I would say, that was able to find your passion and combine it with work. Not many people are able to do that, and a lot of people are still searching for that, finding their passion and putting it to work as well. So what advice would you tell someone out there today that's trying to align both their passion and work?
I think it's less about passion. Passion is actually not correlated as strongly with success and like happiness. I think it's about finding little things every day and noticing them. I think a lot of people are looking for this huge headline. I think the truth comes out of like little things every day. So if you just stop and say, like, take a journal for a week or a month and just write down like, what are the things that energized me today? What were the things that de-energized me? And then you take a step back after a week or a month, you start to see the patterns and like basically what energizes you. And through that, you can start to see the value you like to create in the world. So it doesn't, again, doesn't have to be about this big thing. I think it starts with these little daily moments and just being self-aware about, even if it was just 5 minutes out of the day, the rest of your day sucks, but there's like 5 minutes that you're like, I enjoyed that 5 minutes. Notice those moments and just try to connect those dots to figure out like what makes you tick. That's where you're going to start to find the meaning. And to know you're not going to find it outside of yourself. You're only going to find it in internal reflection about when you rub up against the world, like what are the things that move you? Yeah, I would say, I think our culture wants us to think about our careers as movies or as like these great sweeping accomplishments. All the research shows people who are happy and fulfilled are focused on the day-to-day. They're not focused on those things because those things are never good enough. You never get where you need to go with that mindset.
Right. And then people are always going to be searching for the next thing, and what's the next thing after that, right?
Yeah. Whereas, like, I think if you can be present in your day to day and find joy in that, it'll lead you to doing more and more impactful work, and it'll lead you to being fulfilled. Whereas if you're always chasing some abstract concept of a future state, even if you get there, you're probably not going to be happy when you get there. To do in our society, we're very future focused.
Yeah. I hear it all the time, and I even struggle with that myself too, because we're so goal oriented, you know. And even with the new year that just passed, like, what's your new year resolution? And oftentimes people fail in their new year resolution within like the first week, because I think it's not practical enough, looking at it in a short term and day to day versus like long term goals.
What's also, I think, I don't know if you've ever been in therapy, but when you work with a therapist, like before they help you change, all they really want you to do is notice when something happens. Like notice when the anger, but just being able to see things happen. So you have to change, just be aware. Like if you can do that, then you'll start to get to the next step. We try to jump 3 steps ahead, but awareness is really the first step to get to know yourself and recognize when things are happening.
You have reached the end of this episode. We apologize for the abrupt ending and will be working on transitions for future episodes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on our website at www.dayoneway.com or follow us on social media.